It's Friday, December the 8th, and this is The National.
Tonight, as the fires in California intensify, tens of thousands leave their homes and exhausted firefighters struggle to keep pace.
A Canadian-backed company finds a novel use for stem cells, little heart pumps that could help save lives.
But we begin once again tonight in the Middle East, where earlier today, rocks and tear gas filled the air. And tonight, just hours ago, there was much more than that. Rockets from Gaza, airstrikes from Israel, topping off a Friday filled with prayers and protests. Palestinian officials say at least 15 people were injured in the airstrikes, which Israel says targeted Hamas military sites. Retaliation, Israel says, for 2 rockets fired into its territory earlier today. All of this after Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Palestinians flooded the streets, the biggest crowds in Gaza. A 30-year-old Palestinian man was shot dead, a second person died in hospital, and dozens more were injured. The U.S. decision was also the subject of a special UN Security Council meeting. Britain called the move unhelpful. U.S. ambassador took it as an opportunity to take a swipe at the UN.
Israel will never be, and should never be, bullied into an agreement by the United Nations or by any collection of countries that have proven their disregard for Israel's security.
All that diplomatic sound and fury about this city, Jerusalem. On a day named for rage, you could expect flare-ups. Derek Stoffel certainly did, and he found them.
Trump, you will see! Trump, you will see!
Palestinians are still angry, still out on the streets. 3 days after Donald Trump called Jerusalem the capital of Israel, young and old, still filled with fury. Trump is a dog, he says, a hoodlum. In East Jerusalem, tensions flared as Israeli police moved in. There was pushing and shoving and skirmishes that flared all afternoon.
So the Israeli security forces have brought in reinforcements. We're across the street from the old city, and you can see there are officers on horseback. Hundreds of extra Israeli security forces have been deployed to the old city ahead of this day of rage.
Demonstrations here after Friday prayers have a history of turning violent quickly. Sentiments were stirred up yesterday by the militant group Hamas. It called for a day of rage and a new uprising or intifada against Israel. Instead, today was more a day of high tensions. And it seems for some Palestinians, the last few days have marked a turning point.
I believe in peace, but I don't believe in peace process.
This longtime Palestinian activist says it will be the street, not the negotiating table, that will give the Palestinian people what they long for.
Popular, continuous, popular resistance is the way.
There are some who say the subdued protests are a sign that many Palestinians are simply fed up after decades spent fighting for their own state with little to show in the end. But this Palestinian politician says not true.
These people are not tired. In Al Khalil are not tired. In Nablus are not tired. In Gaza are not tired. In Al Fahim and Nazareth are not tired.
And that's why grassroots activists are vowing that these protests against Donald Trump will not be the last. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And then there were the anti-American protests spread across this region and beyond. People filled the streets of Beirut after Friday prayers, burning tires, serving as roadblocks for protesting Palestinians living in refugee camps. Demonstrations were seen across Europe, gathering near Berlin's Brandenburg Gate and outside the U.S. Embassy in London tonight.
This is not merely some harmless symbolic maneuver.
Even on Donald Trump's doorstep, hundreds of Muslims prayed outside the White House this afternoon, part of a peaceful demonstration in solidarity with the Palestinians. Trump was home, but likely didn't see the crowd. But back here in the center of the storm, life looks different. Yes, as you saw in Derek's story, there were clashes in places like Damascus Gate, and yet Jerusalem is, in an odd way, calmer than many people expected it would be, almost as if on this day there is a holding back of sorts. For a massive crowd with a lot on their minds, they were so quiet on their way to Friday prayers. It's not easy to get to the Al-Aqsa Mosque on typical Fridays. There can be checkpoints, detours, loud, angry voices. Not today. There seems to be a bit of an Israeli strategy at play here. They haven't restricted vehicles coming through this area. They haven't restricted the age of the men coming here to pray. Those things they sometimes do on days that are expected to be controversial and full of conflict. But for the moment, they appear to just be letting this day happen. Not only did the U.S. government reportedly ask Israeli officials to mute their celebrations, but the Israeli security establishment clearly decided to ease up on a show of force, maybe thinking backing off a bit would keep the calm for now. And once the prayers were done, it was back to the usual uninterrupted chaos of the place. Commerce alongside commentary. Muspa Shabana has been selling newspapers in East Jerusalem for 70 years, under rule of the British, then the Jordanians, then the Israelis. Just let the days pass as they pass, is his advice from his perch. Don't mistake that for acceptance. It's possibly just resignation. Khaled Abutai seems to feel a bit of that. His brothers are in jail after clashes with the Israelis. Another lost an eye. Today, he just wants to go home, not do battle.
Without throw stones, without anything, if they stay here in Jerusalem, that's fight. That's we can call that's fight.
So just living here is fighting?
Yeah, this is fighting.
Yes, there were flashes of violence today. There will be again. But daily life for Jerusalemites doesn't shift much with this week's declarations. They go on. In nearby Jewish West Jerusalem, life doesn't feel altered. Not to young Yovel.
But I think Trump is making Jerusalem officially acknowledged as the capital of Israel.
Seem like a big deal to you, or maybe it doesn't make a difference?
Biggest deal.
Yovel is busy. Homework with a family friend who's teaching him the stories behind prayers.
What's the main thing? Conflict. Conflict makes a good story.
Conflict they know, and Jerusalem they love. For Shlomo Gewurtz, Trump's decree is just the right thing.
We pray for Jerusalem 3 times a day, for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So this is bound to happen. On the other hand, wow, President of the United States changes the course of foreign policy with one proclamation.
They talk of prayers until the hot chocolate is cold, and then it's time to go. Time matters. This is also what Muslims and Jews share about this city, the rhythm of a religious Friday. Come dusk, the world powers down. The Shabbat siren signaling the Sabbath for the Jews. Most retreat into their Jerusalem homes, as do the Palestinians, while the outside world fights about and for both of them. And there's one last scene we want to show you tonight from Israel. On a day of widespread anti-American sentiment, this Tel Aviv City Hall lit up like the United States flag tonight. The red, white, and blue interchanging with Israel's color, a tribute to Donald Trump's declaration on Jerusalem. So we'll be watching things closely here in the next days ahead. But Rosie, I know you are following something developing in Ottawa tonight.
That's right, Adrienne. The Canada Revenue Agency is backtracking on some big changes it made to the disability tax credit affecting thousands of Canadians with diabetes. People have voiced their anger at the department's treatment of people with type 1 diabetes when benefits were stripped away this past spring. Our Margot McDermott explains today's sudden about-face.
Kimberly Hansen now has time to get into the Christmas spirit. She and other type 1 diabetics just won a battle with the Canada Revenue Agency.
It's been a bit of a long battle, and there were days that we weren't sure we were going to be able to achieve resolution on this.
This year, thousands of diabetics found out they no longer qualify for the federal disability tax credit. a credit they used to get if they spent 14 hours or more a week caring for their disease.
We've heard so much frustration, so much concern expressed from so many fronts.
In May, the CRA sent a letter to staff saying that most adult diabetics won't qualify because they can generally manage their daily insulin therapy without taking 14 hours a week. Under opposition fire, the minister denied anything had changed. But today, her department backtracked, reverting to its former approach to assessing tax credits, promising to review all those denied in the last 8 months.
That clarification letter was a confusion.
And today, the parliamentary secretary apologized.
Of course. I mean, when there's apology due, we do apologize for that.
But you're saying in this instance, you do apologize to people. Okay.
Oh, almost.
The government has also re-established a committee to provide advice to the CRA on the needs of people with disabilities. Kimberly Hansen thinks it's a first step towards healing a rift that didn't need to happen in the first place.
Okay, let's go look what else there is.
Margaret McDermott, CBC News, Ottawa.
Diabetics aren't the only ones feeling the clampdown, though, by the CRA on the disability tax credit. Autism Canada says more than 100 families ran into challenges themselves when applying for or renewing the benefit.
The stories we heard were frustrating, maddening, and without exception, heartbreaking. Overwhelmingly, they were stories of delays, misinformation, and inconsistency.
But the government says today's ruling will only apply to people with diabetes administering insulin. It will not review rejected tax credit applications for people living with autism or any other disorder for that matter. The number of claims rejected related to mental functions, that's what the department calls them, have climbed to an all-time high, from about 9,000 last year to more than 16,000 this year. For its part, the Revenue Minister's office says more Canadians than ever qualified for the credit, but recognizes that there remains significant room for improvement in how the agency administers this credit and others for people with disabilities. So, lots of questions still to be answered by the department there. They backtracked on one. There may be others to come, Andrew.
Yeah. Meantime, Rosie, let's take folks to Southern California, where raging fires caused some heartbreaking scenes today. Take a look. This was a horse training center where burning barns caused a rush of panic. Hundreds of thoroughbreds had to be set free, but some were too scared to leave. Trainers think at least 30 of them died, some in the flames and others trampled while trying to escape. Now, Donald Trump has declared a state of emergency for California, where wildfires are raging down the coast for the 5th straight day. Tonight, authorities confirmed the death of a 70-year-old woman in Ventura County. She was killed in a car crash trying to escape the area. It is the first death connected to the 6 major fires now burning in the southern part of the state. The latest 2 are in the San Diego area, where those horses were, and where the wall of flames took a lot of people by surprise. The huge orange flames quickly overtook the night sky as people rushed to grab what they could and go.
We started really throwing everything in the car when I saw embers starting to hit our roofs.
By daylight, the damage was viciously clear. Entire neighborhoods were scorched. Across the state, 190,000 people have been chased out of their homes. From San Diego up the Pacific coast to Santa Barbara, winds are blowing from the interior and fanning the flames.
The Thomas Fire has now made its way all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
The Thomas Fire is the monster here, the biggest and most aggressive. It's still on the move, quickly growing north, east, and west today to more than 500 square kilometers. And for the more than 3,000 firefighters on the ground there, it is slow, painstaking work.
Vegetation is extremely dry down on these Southern California fires. Your humidity, your relative humidity is between 5 and 8% as we're talking right now. Couple that with the winds, the terrain, you can imagine it's a battle.
In all, there are 5,700 firefighters on the front lines across the state. Sadly, 500 homes and buildings have already been destroyed, and another 23,000 homes are still threatened.
We've always said fire season in the state of California down here in the States. There is no season in that phrase anymore. It's year-round.
Now, the CBC's Kim Brunhuber is witnessing California's devastating new reality firsthand. Today, he was with firefighters doing their best to save what they can.
This fire is a paradox. It's huge, it's spreading, it's all around us, and yet it's often hard to find. Anthony DeMarta and his crew have been tramping through the bush all morning, looking for flames.
It just seems there are so many hot spots. I mean, how do you get to them all?
Just do the best we can.
This crew came all the way from Carson City, Nevada to help.
How do you feel it's going?
So far, not too much luck. It does what it wants in this wind.
The wind, that ever-changing wind. Firefighters have to chase the flames through this ghostly terrain, past burnt-out bridges, past homes still smoking.
Down power line there, smoking.
These firefighters from Fresno, California, were told to station themselves here ahead of the fire, only to find that the fire had already come and gone. From the southern end of the fire, the smoke just looks like clouds, but that's where the fire is at its worst and hardest to reach. So they attack it from above, but they need to get close. The northern end of the fire. This crew is from Dayton, Nevada, not the first time they've come to California's aid.
Poor California has been hit so hard this year, and kind of feel for them.
They've been tasked to clear the road so other firefighters can get in. I drive in with Ventura Fire, past downed power lines, past rock slides, finally to the flames.
We're just seeing right now, I mean, this is just kind of picked up as we're speaking here.
Yeah, so what you can see behind me are the effects of wind, and it's literally like taking a bellows into a fireplace and getting a fire going in your fireplace. When the winds and the down canyon winds come down through this corridor here, it affects fire behavior very drastically, and it makes for erratic fire conditions, very volatile.
The winds pick up, time to move. A nearby crew watches and waits. While in the bush, the crew from Tahoe slogs it out, tree by tree, branch by branch, log by log. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Ventura County, California.
It is hard to overstate the terror that homeowners in the affected regions must be feeling, and for good reason. So many California homes have gone from this to this, and quickly. From dream house to kindling. Tranquil suburban sanctuaries reduced to charred mounds of rubble. And wealth, normally so important in America, is no defense against the flames. It's not much safer out on the roads either. The fires are relentless, devouring everything in their way. What Californians really need now is heavy rain, and lots of it.
Still ahead on The National, first-hand accounts of the anxiety in Toronto's gay community, and Toronto police respond to criticism after a string of deaths and disappearances.
Plus, small organs, big impact. We'll take you inside the labs where Canadians are growing tiny organs.
And a family from a small Ontario town speaks out after a shocking attack. What happened when a man came after them with a baseball bat?
He was going to attack our son. He was going for our son. That's why he jumped in and he received all the impact.
How's it feel right now?
Well, a little bit sore, but I can deal with it.
The fact that these three investigations are in a small geographical area of the city has caused some great concern. The evidence today tells us that there is not a serial killer based on the evidence that's involved.
That was Toronto's police chief earlier today, trying to tamp down rising fears in the city's gay village about, as you heard there, a possible serial killer. Right now, the force is investigating the disappearance of several people from that community, some later found dead. Two gay men, Andrew Kinsman and Salim Essen, went missing earlier this year. Essen in April, Kinsman in June. Neither has been found. Allura Wells, a transgender woman, disappeared in July. Her body was found a month later. And just 2 weeks ago, Tess Ritchie went missing. Her body was found not far from where she was last seen in the Church Wellesley village. Tess Ritchie's case has left area residents especially upset and ready to take matters into their own hands. Natalie Nanowski explains.
It's the other side, where kitty corner to where she was visiting.
And it was that stairwell?
Yeah.
It's the stairwell where Tess Ritchie's body was found, on the side of an empty house. She went missing in November, and was found 4 days later, not by police, but by her own mother. Community leader Nikki Ward says she met Richie's mom when she flew in from North Bay to look for her 22-year-old daughter.
I'm looking at this and I cannot believe it, that we are this close to the street, 50 feet away from where she was reported missing.
This year, at least 6 people have disappeared in Toronto's gay village. The body of Alora Wells was found in a ravine in August, but she was only identified in November. Ward says police didn't take it seriously when she was first reported missing.
Disgusting. No question about it. The thing is riddled with bigotry and incompetence from beginning to end. And it is very, very similar in terms of its description to what happened to Ms. Ritchie.
How confident are you right now in the Toronto Police Force?
Oh, I don't have the least amount of confidence in Toronto Police Services. And those who are more oppressed and more marginalized, like the trans community, are saying, forget it, there's no point.
Discrimination was something Toronto's police chief had to address today as he gave an update on the area's disappearances.
I worked homicide for 8.5 years, ran homicide, and I can tell you there is no diminishment of investigation due to type of lifestyle or individual. Every single case was aggressively investigated with as much passion and as much vigor as necessary to solve the case.
For Joshua Hind, these cases hit close to home. He says police didn't bother looking for his gay uncle 23 years ago, who then turned up dead in a Toronto park.
I just know how my uncle's case was treated. I know how, in fact, the police never solved his case. The only reason we know what happened to him is because his killer in prison confessed.
Saunders says the force is reviewing how it handles missing persons investigations, but Ward isn't holding her breath. She's among a group of people in the community starting a Safe Walk program so that others don't go missing. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
A disturbing story to tell you about out of southwestern Ontario. A family is recovering after being attacked in a mall parking lot by a man with a baseball bat. They captured the terrifying ordeal on video and then posted online. Amanda Marchison spoke with them earlier today, but a warning, the video is disturbing.
4 hits.
Sergio Estepa still can't explain it. Hit 4 times, and for what? He still doesn't know.
He tried to go through us, so I started recording a video. My wife tried to call the police, but in the commotion, she can't just articulate everything. Why are you going to give me my phone?
You're under arrest.
Oh,
This video captured some of the commotion. A stranger in a parking lot in the middle of the afternoon. And anger, a lot of it.
Stay away from me. In some point, he started yelling, asking for help because we were terrorists. And we just tried to defuse the situation.
The 36-year-old man did not speak in court today. He was denied bail just moments after he was charged with aggravated assault and 3 counts of assault with a weapon.
I'm shocked. I'm outraged that something like this would happen.
It's ISIS! Stay away from me!
ISIS! Police say this video is a big reason they caught up with the accused after he drove off. Investigators are now looking at this as a hate crime.
When there's overtones like that in regards to possible hate-motivated bias, and obviously from that video you can tell there's something there.
The Estepas are Colombian, and while these injuries, a cracked rib and bruises, are painful, they say they hope the man in the parking lot gets help.
I know that it's not the city, it's not the country, it's not the people in this country.
Amanda Marchison, CBC News, London.
Okay, next on The National, 50 years after the world's first heart transplant, a big breakthrough in growing tiny, tiny organs. And a Canadian team is leading the way.
You see how they're twitching? Come take a look. That's so cool. Oh, isn't that amazing?
We need somebody in that Senate seat who will vote for our Make America Great Again agenda. So get out and vote for Roy Moore. Do it. Do it.
Well, on The National tonight, another big boost for Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore at a rally just a couple hours ago in Florida. You just heard it. The U.S. president once again voicing his support. And of course, this is despite the multiple allegations of sexual misconduct against Moore. It all comes to a head next Tuesday when the people of Alabama vote for their next senator. 15 UN peacekeepers have been killed in the worst attack on UN personnel in almost a quarter century. Fighters from a local extremist group overran a remote base in the Democratic Republic of Congo late last night. More than 50 peacekeepers were hurt, and 3 are missing. All of the peacekeepers who were killed were Tanzanian. Bertrand Charest, the former Canadian national ski coach convicted of sexually abusing young athletes, was sentenced to 12 years in prison today. Charest's lawyer said he respected the decision.
Obviously, when there are infractions that are committed on minors, especially when you're in a position of authority, courts take that in consideration and come down very hard on these types of acts.
Charest was found guilty of multiple charges of sexually abusing young female athletes during the 1990s. 9 of the victims were between 12 and 19 at the time, a fact the Quebec judge pointed out repeatedly while chastising Charest over his lack of remorse. With time already served, Charest must spend another 7 years and 10 months behind bars. Well, it may be hard to remember given our advances in medical science, but not long ago, a failing heart effectively meant death until a bold doctor from South Africa performed the world's first heart transplant 50 years ago this week, and that changed the world.
When you did your first heart transplant, did you predict what the world would be like in this field 20 years later?
Well, the thing that surprised me is that it took such a long time for the heart transplant to become a widely accepted procedure.
That was Barbara Frum's 1987 conversation with Dr. Christian Barnard, 20 years after that first huge breakthrough. And there have been many more since, thanks to crucial drug advances. They can make the difference between a body accepting and rejecting an organ. But testing those drugs is time-consuming and expensive, not to mention you eventually need real human organs for trials. But as Renee Filipponi discovered, thanks to a breakthrough with stem cells, scientists have now grown mini organs in a lab, which could speed up the process and turn into big business.
Look close and you can see it beat. Heart tissue grown from stem cells used to test future drugs. The miniature heart-like structure suspended in a jar, pulsing. Kevin Costa is one of the scientists behind NovaHeart.
The drug discovery process is a lengthy and expensive process. It typically takes about a decade and a couple of $1 billion US to take a drug from its initial concept to clinical trials.
And most drugs never make it past testing. The main reason they are toxic to the human heart, something difficult to determine when testing on animals and often not discovered until well into the human trial phase.
So what we'd like to do with NovaHeart is earlier in this process, be able to test drugs, test compounds in human heart muscle. The idea being that if these are going to fail, you want them to fail as early as possible.
It starts with taking blood cells, which are genetically reprogrammed to be stem cells, then manipulated into beating heart cells. By the millions, those are placed into a mold.
The cells kind of go in, they'll form kind of like a jello-like solution, but then over time they'll kind of reorganize and kind of try to hug on or compact near like the closest thing, and it'll take a shape of an inner mold that we have, which will be in this shape. And then we essentially can remove it out and then transplant it into any bioreactor that we want.
This is one of the company's 3 labs. The computer technology is built here to monitor the mini hearts after they have been given drugs. This is just a model of a testing system they use.
What would be happening?
Right. So there's a mirror right in the center amongst all 4 of these chambers so that we can have a single camera looking from the top and acquiring all the data from all 4 chambers at once.
On the screen is a video feed of 3 specimens beating in the Hong Kong lab. The company says what it's doing stands out because of the heart-like structure of their cells.
We can actually measure it's a hollow chamber that's pumping, so you can actually measure how much pressure the organoid is generating, kind of like your blood pressure. You can measure how fast it's beating, so kind of like your heart rate.
But NovaHeart is not alone in using stem cells for drug testing. It's been happening in labs for some time.
You see how they're twitching? Come take a look. That's so cool. Oh, isn't that amazing?
This beating strip of heart muscle is the product of Milica Radicek. The University of Toronto professor has her own biotech startup and believes the possibilities are endless.
You can make tissue for anybody, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of lines derived all over the world. You can call companies up and get cardiomyocytes from patients that have certain disease, and you can use them to build tissues and test drugs.
Making it possible to test drugs on specific patients, essentially personalizing drug testing. But there are limitations. It won't replace animal or human testing at this point.
Initially, when we started doing this, I must say that pharma companies were skeptical. They were asking us, well, show me that this really works like a real heart, show me physiological relevance, show me the drug testing data. And now the questions that we're getting is, what is your throughput? Like, and what's your turnaround time? Like, if we send you something, how fast can you turn it over?
For those outside the scientific community, the technology is a head-turner. And despite still being in the early stages and futuristic by nature, this technology is already getting attention from investors and the global pharmaceutical industry. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Irvine, California.
Wow. So maybe now you're wondering, how far off is a lab-grown, full-size transplantable human heart? Well, the short answer is pretty far off. Scientists are growing patches for damaged hearts, but an entire functioning heart, that's much more complex.
But that was cool. Just ahead on The National, the tensions of the Middle East and modern life, seen, though, through a comic lens.
I did marry a Jewish woman. I'm Palestinian. She makes me go through checkpoints in my own apartment. It's a beautiful love story. Our families are so depressed. They're so, right, like one side of the family is racist, the other homophobic. It's, I'm just kidding. They're both racist and homophobic. They hook up with the lady, she rejects them, automatically a lesbian, right? Doesn't matter what the guy looks like, she has to be the problem. I wish I had a 10 for that confidence. I'm the complete opposite. Good-looking guy comes over to talk to me, like this guy is a homosexual. This guy is coming to ask me where I got my purse. I know it.
Iman El-Husseini is on quite the comedy role, and she has a lot of rich, personal material to work with. She's gay and Muslim with a Jewish wife. Susan Ormiston went to see how she bridges cultures with laughter.
Please welcome Iman El-Husseini, folks. Here she comes.
Great to be back in Canada. So I am originally Palestinian, Muslim. The silence, we get it all the time. Thanks. So of course, when I got older and I told my Middle Eastern parents I wanted to be a comedian, my father looked to my mother and he's like, you owe me $1,000. She is retarded. She is.
She's Canadian, Muslim, gay, and wildly funny, cracking them up at Yuck Yucks in Halifax.
This is why I'm convinced.
She jokes she's a walking, wisecracking current affair, constantly explaining herself.
What is your name?
Iman.
Iman
El-Husseini.
Iman El-Husseini.
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 El-Husseini. No girl. El-Husseini. I'm a comedian. I'm here performing at Yuck Yucks. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yuck
Yucks headliner tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1.
Iman is the funny girl from Montreal who simply attracts people.
How great is that? I love that, Misha.
They're drawn to her and she to them, picking up a future fan anywhere she can.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You should come. It's going to be expensive to see me in a couple of years, so come now while it's cheap. Believe it or not, my parents' wedding anniversary happens to fall on September 11th. And a couple of years ago, my parents celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary. Okay, we had a barbecue in the backyard. Can you picture this? A barbecue, Arabic music blaring, a whole lamb roasting on a spit. People were terrified. But to make matters worse, my father decides to make a speech with his very heavy and terrifying Arabic accent. September 11th is a very, very special day for me and my wife. It is the day that Allah brought us together in unity. Thank you for coming to celebrate this special day with us. Allahu Akbar, right? So at this point, helicopters are hovering over the house. Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah are sending us greeting cards. Not good.
The anniversary date is true, but a long time ago. Her parents married in the Middle East. They had Iman and her 2 siblings in Kuwait before emigrating to Montreal when Iman was 10.
And my dad was just like, you're in Canada, land of opportunity. You got to be the best that you could possibly be. Anything.
Her dad wanted her to be a politician, maybe even prime minister.
Was your dad disappointed? Big time. Yeah, he was not happy that I chose comedy. It's not a stable career, obviously. It's a very, very difficult career to succeed in.
She promised her dad she would succeed, but she'd have to move to what would become Donald Trump's America.
I got a green card based on my comedy credits. That's a huge deal. Cool. Right? That's some kind of achievement.
And you got across the border.
I did, with an Arabic Muslim name. Come on. That's a huge achievement.
And now you have one of those cool Nexus cards.
I have Nexus too on top of it, yeah. You know, having Nexus as an Arab woman, I know how it feels like to be like a white person traveling now. It's so great.
Iman picked up and moved to Brooklyn, New York, and started a new life with Jess Solomon.
I mean, that's how it is in my head always.
Jewish, from Montreal, also a comic.
Did the other cousins tell him?
I have no idea.
The two got married in Canada before settling in the States last year.
You told me that your parents were typical immigrant parents in that they wanted you to be a professional something else.
Yeah.
Practically anything but.
Yeah.
You also said that you're not talking to them right now.
Yes.
What's that about?
So we're both having a hard time accepting each other for who we are, I guess you could say. So I fell in love and married a woman, which I think like I hit the jackpot. I'm like living a modern day fairy tale and my parents are not on board, which is so heartbreaking. They didn't disown me or anything. It was more of, we can't accept this. We like you. We like your partner. We wish that you guys weren't together. Maybe you could have married like brothers or something and stayed close.
Iman describes her parents as not overly religious, even while she was trying on her faith in her early teens.
So I started exploring religion on my own. I started praying 5 times a day on my own. And then I stayed religious for a while. And then I tried bacon and never looked back.
Come on, that's the punchline. But what really happened?
I don't know. I just got older. I feel like so many so-called religious people are so hypocritical in so many ways. And I really believe that religion should be something that's personal. If you start flaunting it in front of other people, it loses the purpose of how genuinely religious you are. It becomes more of a show. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but being Muslim has always sucked. You know what I'm saying? It's never been easy, but I don't necessarily fit the profile because I'm not a hijabi or a niqabi, right? I'm more of a cleavagey Muslim. That's my category.
Jokes aside, on the recent Quebec law restricting face coverings like niqabs,
I don't support the face veil because it's not part of my religion.
So you would accept the law in Quebec?
100%. It's not part of my religion, and they're fighting for it as a religious freedom thing, and it's sacrilegious to me.
But I've heard many Muslim women say that it is part of my religion.
I mean, that's how they interpret their religion, but they will all admit that it's not compulsory, and that the hijab is more than enough.
Do you still pray?
Before really important shows, I become so religious. Just like reciting the Quran, you should see how I become like an imam, practically.
Put your hands together.
For Jess Solomon!
I'm Jewish. My wife is Palestinian. That's how our families reacted to. Thank you. Yowza. I like that.
It's Thursday night, and Jess is on stage first at a local comedy club in Brooklyn.
Before moving here, we went to see this lawyer, and the lawyer was like, I just have to ask you guys, is this a marriage of convenience? And I was like, busted lady, my big plan to get into America is to marry a Canadian Palestinian Muslim woman. Hop right over that border.
40 minutes away in Manhattan, Iman is leaving a gig, racing back to follow her wife on the stage.
Tonight I'm having a very good comedy night. I'm booked at really good venues and good shows.
Already she's running late.
Oh my God, worst Uber ride ever.
It's so great to be here. I'm the
Palestinian portion of the Jewish girl that you saw earlier. I don't know if you guys remember. I'm the one who got the green card. It is a marriage of convenience, by the way. It is. I did this. 2017 has really been the best year of my career so far. Going from begging for stage time to being asked for stage time, that's a huge thing.
And where do you see your future?
Fame and fortune, of course. Why are Muslims always on the news? And I have to admit one thing, we definitely have anger issues, okay? You guys got quiet, you got scared. It's very powerful. So listen, I'm like an open-minded liberal person, but when I get angry, Taliban angry, I lose my mind. I'm like, kill them all. Women and children first. I don't give a shit. And I'm just in line at the grocery store. It's very unhealthy. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.
Go deeper on the stories of the day earlier in the day. Why don't you subscribe to our newsletter at cbcnews.ca/The National. The National Today takes you inside our journalism every afternoon.
It's a tragic situation for the community. I can't imagine what the family and friends of the family are going through at this time.
A 3-year-old boy has died after a house fire on the Six Nations Reserve in southern Ontario. Officials say the fire broke out this morning. The boy who died had been trapped under a bed on the second floor. 6 other children were in the house at that time, 2 of them now in serious condition. It's not yet clear what started the fire.
I just want justice for my son. He had a whole bright life in front of him, and it was taken due to some neglect, and it's not supposed to happen.
That was the mother of Youssef Al-Hasnawi speaking today at a vigil in his honor. The 19-year-old was killed last weekend in Hamilton, shot, according to police, after trying to stop an altercation on the street. Paramedics have since been criticized for how long it took to take Al-Hasnawi to hospital. His mother says she's filed a formal complaint. And the sports world is buzzing tonight about the man they call the Babe Ruth of Japan. Shohei Otani is making the jump to the major leagues, and just about every team in North America wanted him, but it was the Los Angeles Angels who won him over. A big surprise because they weren't exactly the highest bidding team. What sets the 23-year-old apart? He's an ace pitcher and a stellar hitter.
The British Prime Minister has made what she's calling a breakthrough agreement on Brexit, and just in time. The negotiations were down to the wire, and an important partner was finally ready to give it a green light. Nala Ayed looks at what Theresa May got in Brussels.
It was such a last-minute deal that Prime Minister Theresa May only had a couple of hours of sleep last night before getting on a plane at 4 a.m. to finally clinch it. The end of a long, torturous week caps off a long, torturous year for the Prime Minister. Nearly halfway through December, and she just squeaks by with a breakthrough. Both sides admit it isn't a perfect deal, and it still has to be ratified by the 27 EU heads of state next week. But without it, the EU had refused to proceed with talks on a new relationship after Brexit, and they had set a deadline for Sunday.
Getting to this point has required give and take on both sides. And I believe that the joint report being published is in the best interests of the whole of the UK.
There were 3 major divorce issues to resolve. They're not entirely resolved, but there is a basic outline now. First off, the divorce bill. The UK says it will be the equivalent of up to $67 billion payable to the EU over several years. Agreeing to protect the rights of each other's citizens who remain in the UK and the EU, and no hard border between the UK's Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, which remains in the EU. It was the last point that made this such an agonizing week. May had gone to Brussels on Monday with what she thought was a deal, but it was the Northern Ireland Democratic Unionist Party who scuttled it over the border issue. You'll remember this is the party that is key to May's survival after she gambled with an election this past June and lost a comfortable Tory majority. And it could again hold up a Brexit deal if it doesn't like what it sees in the future.
So, Nala, was this a win or a loss for the PM?
Now, of course, there are major differences of opinion, even in May's own party, on today's deal and whether it gives away too much. But overall, this was a rare 11th hour win for the Prime Minister. Even Michael Gove, who's one of the key architects of the Brexit campaign, called it a significant political achievement for her. The fact is that given the big picture, if she hadn't clinched this deal, she may not have survived. But such as it is, the win is short-lived because this was the easy part. In the words of Donald Tusk, who's the president of the European Council, breaking up is hard, but breaking up and building a new relationship is much harder.
Okay, thanks for that, Nala. Appreciate it. An 8-year-old boy from Ontario is wowing millions of people around the world after video of one of his mixed martial arts competitions went viral. His extreme moves are our pick for tonight's moment.
What do you want people to think when they see you?
I'm a ninja. I've been doing Taekwondo for about 4.5 years, and I've been doing mixed martial arts for 2 years. I train every day around 2 hours or more sometimes, and I love doing it because it's fun doing tricking weapons. It's fun doing like all this crazy stuff and being on TV a lot.
So, like the being on TV a lot thing, I get. Training.
Well, and you succeeded. Yeah.
Training 2 hours a day, I do not. It's phenomenal. And his hair was also masterful as well.
A lot of things are pretty impressive. And I love how he's just like, he's the real life version of every 8-year-old's imagination. Like, it's incredible, right?
Yes, every little boy I know thinks that he's a ninja, and none of them are. But this guy is. Yeah. Incredible. All right.
That
is The National for December 8th. Good night, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Have a good night.